All right, so here's our review. You're doing great. As long as you keep going, you are always doing great. All you have to do is keep going. Like every day, just put in some time. I don't know if I shared this. Maybe I did. I think I did. I totally did. Secrets to success. I told you about like drop by drop, the bucket gets filled. So if you want to accomplish something, if you want to achieve something, every day you just need to put in a little bit of time towards being successful. And this just isn't like somebody's theory. Like this has been studied. So Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Outliers, and you can check that book out. Outliers. Malcolm. Malcolm Gladwell. There we go. And he studied what makes people successful. So there's the book. And one of the things that makes people successful is 10,000 hours. So it's basically 4 hours a day for 10 years, which is a really long time. But to be effective, right? Not necessarily successful, but effective, it takes a lot less. And so just a couple hours a day, every day for 2 years, you're going to be fantastic. Already, in the little bit of time you've put in so far, look at how far you've come. Okay, so congratulations to you. You officially, once again, have my permission to go out and celebrate. So whatever that looks like for you, whether it's just walking to the kitchen and getting a drink of water or heading out for dinner, go for it, man. Go for it. You've accomplished something. And woman, person, whoever's over there on the other side. I don't, just like to try to be sensitive to those terms. So in this review, first of all, I just want to look at how far we've come. So I'm going to come up here and hit refresh, right? But we did our entire getting started, and then we configured our environment, and we had a review there. And then we did introduction to HTML, and we had our review here. And so far, you've had two good celebrations out of this course. And now we've done our introduction to CSS, and you've got another review and another celebration. So how great is that? So let's take a look at what we've learned. And this isn't only about like taking a moment just to sort of like have a good time and be thankful for what we've accomplished and to appreciate it, but it's also reviews help us learn. And so that's one of the main intents of the review is to learn. And so here we learned about CSS, and we learned about rule sets. And a rule set has a selector and a declaration block. Let me try that again. A rule set has a selector and a declaration block. And the selector, we learned about the different selectors. We'll talk about those in a second. But the declaration block, a block of code is anything inside curly braces. And the declaration block has declarations in it. And each declaration has a property and then a value, and it ends in a semicolon. All right, cool. So those are rule sets. Rule sets have a selector and a declaration block. Inside declaration blocks are declarations. Declarations are properties and values, and they end with a semicolon. Got it. And so the different selectors that we saw these selectors right here. Whoop, give you a visual. And so we have the tag, where we could select something based upon its tag, like a paragraph or an H1 or HTML or body. Like we could select any of those tags and then target CSS at that. So we have the tag selector, we have the ID selector, we have the class selector. You can only have one ID on a page. That's it, just one. So something, right, a unique ID. You can have many IDs, but they all have to be different. So each ID can only be targeting one thing. A class can target many things, like a class of students, many students. A class can have many different things. It can be applied to many different things. And we also saw there's an attribute selector, and then there's a pseudo class selector, which we saw on the anchor tag. When we hover over something, we could change it. That's pretty cool. So we saw those different selectors. And then we also looked at different resources we could use for learning about CSS. So we saw MDN, and we saw how we could see all of the different possible properties that we could use. And we learned about CSS Tricks as a really good resource. And CodePen is a good place to go for inspiration. And then we saw how to connect CSS and HTML. And so to connect CSS and HTML, right, we could do that in 4 ways. We could link to an external style sheet, or we could have internal styles. We could have style CSS embedded right into our web page, and so that's embedding the CSS internally into the web page between style tags up in the head area. And we could also have inline CSS where it's inline right inside a tag. That's not recommended. And then we could also use @import if we want to have several different CSS pages being imported. So we could break up all of our CSS into many different pages. It makes our CSS modular. We learned about CSS resets and why we might use them and some of the different ones that are out there. And we also learned about CSS comments and Google Fonts and the box model. So everything on a web page is a box in a box. And closely related to the box model, we learned that there's this display property. So it's a property, it's a CSS property. And some of the values it could be set to are block, inline block, and none. And every element has a default display property, but you can change it to get things to do what you want. And so that's a box model, and then also the display. And with the box model, we also learned about border radius, right? Border radius was awesome. So these are all the different CSS properties we learned about in this series of videos on CSS. And so with border radius, we could take things and make them circular or round their edges or create funky shapes. We learned about the trouble thing, top, right, bottom, left, when you have 4 values for something that you could set the 4 sides. Or it's top and bottom, and then right and left when you're setting 2 values. Or it's if you just use 1 value, it sets all 4 at once, right? So there's different ways. We learned about margin 0 auto, right here for centering something, right? And we saw that, that works for block level elements. So we had the image and it was an inline element, it didn't work. But when we made the image a block level element, we could then take that block level element and we could center it, like if its width wasn't the whole page, bring the width down, and then we could center it into the center of the page. All right. So that's the box model. And then we also saw how code completion can totally help us out to figure things out. And so like, for instance, if I had some, CSS up and I wanted to see how does this work, right? I can hold down Control, hit spacebar, and it starts giving me some ideas. But of course, I need to know with border, right, that I need like the 5 pixels or 2 pixels, whatever. So that's code completion, and it's really helpful. It works both on the CSS side and then also on the HTML side, right? Like if I was here and I did that, it gives me, okay, here are some of the other attributes you could use with that tag. Okay, so in addition to all this stuff that we just went over in the review, just by listening to me and hanging out with me and talking, hearing me talk about HTML and CSS, you're starting to learn all of the terminology and the patterns of speech and the idioms we use to talk about coding. So I just use the word idiom. An idiom is a pattern of speech. And in this, culture of web programming, there's certain ways we talk about things. And so you're learning the patterns of speech, you're learning the terminology, you're learning the different things we talk about and the words we use with which we use to talk about them, like rule sets. And rule sets have a selector and a declaration block, and the declaration block has declarations. And just by me repeating those things over and over and over, they're becoming ingrained in your mind because the more you roll around in something, the more it sticks. So you are doing great. We are doing great. This class is great. You're learning great stuff, and you're starting to build great stuff. And we're going to continue learning outstanding things as we go. So I'm not quite sure what the next section is going to be. I got to think about it for a little bit, but I think we're going to be jumping into layout. There's a few other things down here on my to-do list, and of course there's a whole lot more just to really start to do things awesome. I will give you a little preview, and this is some code that a student wrote in one of my classes, and then I refactored it. And so refactoring is when you take code and you fix it, rewrite it, change it. And so I thought, wow, that's really beautiful what this student created. And so then I made a few adjustments just to clean the code up and make it a little bit more idiomatic. That's my own word. It comes from programming and Go. To make it a little bit cleaner and leaner and less. So we'll look at that and less convoluted. Just cleaned it up. And so here, it's pretty nice. And so we're going to learn how to create this page and have a big image behind it pretty soon. But that's one of the things that we have coming. I like that page. This student did a great job. That's one of the things I absolutely want to convey also. The student did a great job. And there's just a few things to clean up about it. So we'll see this. in the coming videos, in the videos to come. All right. I think I need to quit working and go take a break. So I will see you after I've had a break and when I start making some new videos when I figured out what they're going to be about. So congratulations once again, and I look forward to continuing to learn and share more information about creating websites with you.